There was no love lost between those two, was there? Prescott and Mandelson. I think John Prescott called him a crab once, and that was probably one of the most polite things he ever said.
Well, I mean, New Labour was a broad church.
Hello and welcome to the Division Bell. My name is Martyn Brown, political editor of the Daily Express.
Hi, I'm Mikey Smith, deputy political editor of the Sunday Mirror.
How are you, Mikey? Good week?
All right, yeah, good week, busy week. We've had lots of people overseas. Obviously, the G20 has been happening, so we've been a little short-handed. But yes, getting there.
It's been a mixed bag, hasn't it? And woke up this morning to the sad news that John Prescott died aged 86, a titan of British politics over the years.
I mean, you pull out all these words: titan, hero, giant of politics. I think it was Peter Mandelson this morning saying he was the glue that held New Labour together. And there's really you can't overstate the sort of the impact he had on British politics in the sort of 80s, 90s, noughties.
There was no love lost between those two, was there? Prescott and Mandelson. I think John Prescott called him a crab once, and that was probably one of the most polite things he ever said.
Well, I mean, New Labour was a broad church, but I mean, this was the thing. There was a reason he was there, and that was that he was the not only sort of a link between the new project and the traditional working class Labour movement, but also like he brought the team at the top together to an extent. I think the thing we're going to hear a lot as more tributes come in this morning. It's Thursday morning as we're recording this. It's pretty new news, but it's how good a communicator he was, and how sort of genuinely beloved he was by a large chunk of the British public throughout his career. I think we talk a lot about politicians, being down to earth and being able to speak human, as if it's some kind of special skill that is rare and you have to practice a lot. He was just John, and I think that's something that people sort of warmed to.
Yeah, I think in his own words, he was always good at connecting with the voters, wasn't he? After his infamous punch, was it 2001 general election?
I believe so, yeah. Someone threw an egg at him.
Well, yeah. I mean, you would react like that. I mean, that was well.
And people liked that. Honestly, people liked that. It was a human moment. It was a lot of people looked at that and thought, yeah, that's exactly what I would do. And
there were so many moments. There was people remember. There was the two Jags. There was the peacemaker between Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Yeah. The croquet on the lawn when he was supposed to be running the country. I mean, the list goes on.
Yes, a character, definitely. I can't claim to have known him well. I think I spoke to him mostly on the phone a handful of times over the years, but he was always sort of warm and generous. He used to form a Mirror columnist for a very long time. He used to write a great column, and he'll be sorely missed. Not least at the Mirror Christmas party, which he would genuinely used to turn up to.
And I would urge any political geeks listening to maybe take a look at John Prescott versus William Hague in PMQs or DPMQs in the days when David Cameron was leader, and him and Hague, they had a right old ding dong several times, and it was amusing, but it was very politically powerful as well.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, take a look at that.
There was, and I'm going to mangle the quote, but there was a brilliant exchange where obviously John Prescott would, from time to time, fall over his words, which was, I think, something the public liked about him. He wasn't. He was
fallible.
He wasn't airbrushed. He wasn't polished. But it was something along the lines of, maybe sometimes I'm unsure of my words, but I'd rather be unsure of my words than unsure of my beliefs. I'd rather have my problem than his problem.
Is Angela Rayner a kind of a modern day John Prescott?
I mean,
In the sense of...
I don't think she's ever shied away from that. A lot of people have said it, and I don't think she shies away from it. I think she takes it as a badge of honour that she's even sort of spoken about in the same way. I think she is. You know, she's got that gift of. I mean, I'm going to have to stop calling it a gift, but she is a relatively normal person, and she comes across as a relatively normal person. But at the same time, she's a very capable and sort of savvy politician as well. You know, she knows exactly what she's doing. You know, you should never mistake either John Prescott or Angela Rayner being slightly rough and ready and unpolished for them, you know, being not good at what they do, because they really are. And you underestimate them at your peril, which I think we will come back to later. Yes,
well, look forward to that. One of my favourite stories about John Prescott, well, two actually. One on the croquet. I knew the photographer who took that picture of him playing croquet. Sadly, the photographer's no longer with us. But yeah, let's just say he was chased away by security from Dorneywood at the time. But yeah, it was quite funny to see someone from John's background playing croquet in a government-owned property on the lawn. Well, wasn't there a war going on at the time as well? Was that during the Iraq War?
May well have been.
And then the other one was, I've just heard this morning actually, for the first time, when John Prescott was 19, I believe, he used to work on a cruise ship, and on one particular occasion they were on a cruise to New Zealand, and Anthony Eden was on the ship, former Tory Prime Minister, and as part of the entertainment, John Prescott was involved in a boxing match. Anthony Eden was won over by this display, and I think John Prescott got some free beer out of it and maybe some tips as well. And the two had a bit of a meeting. And anyway, when he got into government, finally, all those years later, John Prescott had a painting of that cruise ship in his office. So quite a neat kind of bookend to that.
The question I have is, was Anthony Eden giving him tips on politics or boxing?
I'm not sure Anthony Eden would have been a good boxer, but as we know, Prescott was. So
questions that will never be answered.
Yeah, so we've done a poll this week, and the question was, should the government scrap the planned inheritance tax on farmers with land over £1 million? And Daily Express readers, 82% said yes, it should be scrapped.
And Mirror readers, pretty much the opposite. 76% said no, it should be kept. It's a good policy. It should go ahead. Just 24% saying it should be scrapped.
And of course, this week we had 10,000, 15,000 farmers descending on Whitehall, protesting against the government's new measures.
Yes.
And your favourite TV celebrity farmer, Jeremy Clarkson, was centre stage.
Yes, Jeremy Clarkson was there. I will accept that Jeremy Clarkson was there.
Did you get to speak to him?
I did not get to speak to him. No, I was very far away from him, as far away as possible.
And so it's pretty embarrassing for the Prime Minister, who was 6,000 miles away in Rio de Janeiro at the G20. He couldn't help that. But to have all these furious farmers on his doorstep protesting against what amounts to be a bit of a budget cock-up, what do you make of that?
I mean, you could say it's embarrassing. You could say that, I mean, I don't think he will have particularly minded being on the other side of the planet when this was happening, but I also don't think he's losing any sleep over the protests. I think the government is still sticking to the line that, you know, yes, a lot of these farmers are talking to their accountants, and their accountants are saying, oh, you're going to be in line for this inheritance tax. The government is talking to HMRC, who actually go through people's claims, and they're saying, no, they're not. a tiny handful of these people are ever going to pay inheritance tax on their farms, regardless of what people's accountants say. And let's not forget, people's accountants are never going to be proven wrong until their clients are no longer with us. So I'm not besmirching accountants here, but it seems like a lot of the people who there are a lot of different versions of the calculations being done, and you should really probably go to the people who have the best information. And the people who have the best information is the taxman, and the taxman is saying, "Nah, it's not gonna. It's gonna affect a handful of people."
But whatever, I get there's a dispute over the calculations, but it still impacts hugely on farmers and their thinking and their planning for their futures. And isn't this just an ideological policy by Labour, to crack down on perhaps some wealthy people who want to avoid inheritance tax, and also just to push farmers, punish them into maybe diversifying, and so we can have loads more solar panels and wind farms across our green and pleasant land?
I mean, yes and no. I don't think it's ideological in the sense of the government is going after farmers. I think what they're going after is people, and this, they've said this out loud. This is aimed at people who are exceptionally wealthy and have historically avoided inheritance tax by ploughing all their money into farms, and therefore getting relief on inheritance tax that way. They're not farmers; they're just rich people, and that's who the policy is aimed at. The government doesn't think it's going to drag in anyone, like the farmers it's going to affect are like the richest farmers, because we say it's land valued over 1 million. You still get your tax-free allowance on inheritance tax on top of that, so it's anywhere up to around 3 million in total for a couple. So you would have to pass on 3 million worth of assets, including your farm, before you pay a penny, which seems like quite a lot to me, and I imagine it seems like quite a lot to most people. You've got to remember, a lot of people in this country don't have any assets, don't have houses, don't have cars. There's a lot of people, particularly people who are on the lower end of the income spectrum, don't own property. And I think it's probably a tough sell to a lot of those, and I suspect this is why Mirror readers have been so in favour of the policy. It's a really tough sell when these people are paying their taxes as they should, don't have the opportunity to avoid taxation really, because all they get is the income they have, and on top of that, they're still through their taxes subsidising the farming sector, which they have been for decades.
But the problem is, it's just a cack-handed way the government's gone about this. I mean, they maintain and bang on about how they've put 5 billion into farming.
Yeah.
And then they've introduced this policy to save, 200 odd million a year?
Yeah.
Now, why not just put a little bit... It's all about money and saving money in the budget. So why not just give farmers a little bit less, knock that 5 billion figure down, and keep the policy the same? And then you have happy farmers. The result of this means that farmers are going to maybe not bother with farming anymore. And then UK food production is already on the downward spiral, is going to go down even further. It's just crushing the farming industry.
But in reality, it's not going to. It's hardly going to affect any farmers at all. What it's going to affect is rich people who bought farms as a tax avoidance scheme. That's who it's aimed at. If you scrap this and take a bit of money off the subsidy, it pounds the farmers even further, because they're not benefiting from you getting rid of this. The only people who are really effectively benefiting from it are about 500 or so people who pose as farmers in order to avoid tax. But
the associated communities as well, who, you have these big farmers, wealthy farmers, but then it's not just them, it's the local community around them who benefit from that farm or that
Yeah,
they're affected by it too.
But I would be absolutely amazed if more than a handful of farmers had to sell off even a field to sort of genuine family farmers. You know, the people who we're hearing. And don't get me wrong, farmers have been clobbered for years by.
I can sense the B word.
No. Because farmers have been clobbered for years. They get terrible rates from supermarkets, from food distributors. They don't get paid enough for the product they make. In a bid to make food cheaper for people to eat, and they're getting the rough end of the stick, and they have done for decades. And this isn't going to help that. But at the same time, there is a small group of people who are using the sort of the pretense of being farmers to avoid tax. We go back to Jeremy Clarkson. There was a now infamous interview that he gave in 2021 when he just bought his farm, which he now makes a very successful and I imagine lucrative television programme out of. As well as, you know, doing a bit of farming. Sure, no one's going to argue with that. A lot of people like the TV show. Fine. But he said out loud to a newspaper, I bought this farm to avoid tax, to avoid inheritance tax. Why isn't that sort of open and shut? Why isn't that case closed? I don't understand.
Well, didn't he clarify that with in the other infamous interview with Victoria Derbyshire the other day, where he said he bought it so he could go shooting, and it had the added benefit of not paying inheritance tax. I mean, which he does now.
Before he said that, he also had a pop at the BBC, and I can't imagine why he would be angry with the BBC, who infamously sacked him because he put one of their employees in A&E. Can't imagine why he would have a problem with the BBC.
Anyway, we're talking about the very person you didn't want to talk about.
Yes, we are.
But pretty embarrassing for the government. Another embarrassing thing from this budget, which just keeps on giving in that respect. It's also been a big week because British missiles have just been fired into Russia, Storm Shadow missiles in a big escalation of the Ukraine war.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer, I believe, is kind of sanctioned this. He's been pushing for it. He's been pushing Joe Biden into doing this. Do you think it's going to change anything?
I mean, I think it's already changing things to an extent, possibly not quite as dramatically as it could, but you're right. Keir Starmer's been pushing for the US to give the go-ahead to use Storm Shadows for many months, since the week after he became Prime Minister. It was a week after when he went to Washington for the first time, and he was trying to push Joe Biden into okaying this. They are our missiles. They are UK-made missiles, but they use a guidance system which is made in the US. So, and also because, you know, America's America, we kind of ask them permission to do everything. But Joe Biden has been like, no. And they wanted to do it at this Washington thing, so it was in the Washington trip, so it was in time for the UN General Assembly in September, because Zelensky was going to that, and they wanted to do all a big, you know, thing at the same time. That didn't happen. Didn't happen at the UN either. And there's been several other points at which this could have happened. I think people have been saying all along, we'll learn that Storm Shadows have been approved for use when the first one drops on Russia. And that's literally what happened. Yesterday afternoon, there started to be some reports from Russian bloggers and on Twitter, some pictures of sort of debris from these missiles over the border, about 50 kilometres over the border. And that appears to be confirmation. Again, Ukraine, I think, have been quite open about, yes, that's what this is. They've confirmed it. Neither the US nor the UK have said anything on record that I've seen yet.
What makes me chuckle somewhat is that they actually write Storm Shadow on the missile. It's just,
why do they give them a name?
I mean, that's
Why don't
just
they
for
put a random number on there.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe they just name it for the bloggers who get the video footage just so they know.
The other one, and this is a slight tangent, but the day before the US approved use of the ATACMS missile, which goes, I think, a little bit further than
I love
the
that name
Storm
because
Shadow.
it's if you say it out loud, it's Attack'ems.
Attack'ems, which sounds a bit like a product that Wile E. Coyote might have used in a Looney Tunes cartoon. Attack'ems.
Good
but
impression.
Yeah, thanks. But yeah, no, it's already having an effect. I don't think, there's a lot of people who are worried about, this is going to prompt a nuclear response from Putin. He's already done a bit of saber rattling about, lowering the bar for launching a nuclear response to a non-nuclear attack. And this morning, we've apparently seen Russia use an intercontinental ballistic missile into Ukrainian territory, which seems like overkill because they can go a very, very long way, and they don't need to do that. But that's a message. That's a warning shot, right? It wasn't, as far as we know, a nuclear device. It was we think it was a dummy warhead, but it was a message. But it's extremely unlikely that Putin's actually going to do anything before Donald Trump comes in, is the head and tail of it.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, are we just going to... Things are ratcheting up now, but are we just going to have this brief period where everyone's just loosing off missiles and then Trump comes in and the dynamic then changes because he's got a hotline to the Kremlin?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, Vladimir Putin is a human being and, he's the leader of a country. And he knows that if you launch a nuclear strike, that's it. That's game over. Because, no one lets you get away with that. That's the line you don't cross. So I think it benefits Russia for him to make everyone, maybe you will, a bit worried about it. But it doesn't benefit him at all to actually do it because it's going to do him more damage than he will inflict. So what I suspect he's doing is if he waits until the 20th of January when Donald Trump takes office, Donald Trump is like, I don't want this war to go on any longer. Let's everyone get around the table. And then Putin sees what he can get, whether it's territory or whatever. He'll see what he can get out of a negotiation with Ukraine. And I suspect that's what he's sort of holding out for.
And as we speak now, I think John Healey is due up in the House Commons, or not in the Commons actually, no, in front of the Defence Select Committee.
Yeah.
So he's going to be grilled by MPs. It'll be interesting to see what he says, whether he confirms it. I doubt he will, but see what he says about that. But it's going to dominate the next few weeks as we head towards Trump's inauguration in January.
Yes.
So.
Yes. I mean, say about John Healey confirming it, no one's denying it at this point.
Well, yeah,
which I think is the key.
I think on the way back from Rio,
yes,
the rest of our colleagues who went on the trip, that's when they found out about the Storm Shadows.
God, imagine being on that plane.
Well, yeah,
I think,
but they weren't told anything. But there was there was no confirmation. But as you said, there was no denial either, which is a green light in our world.
If you're on the plane with the Prime Minister when sort of major, potentially nuclear things are happening on the ground, you got to wonder whether you're in the first episode of your own personal series of Designated Survivor, aren't you?
Yes. Yeah. With missiles flying around, you wouldn't want to be in a plane either, would you?
Yeah, probably not.
Should we do Moment of the Week now?
Yes.
Just lighten the load a bit.
A little.
It's been a pretty serious week. So PMQs yesterday. During PMQs, Lee Anderson, ex-Labour, ex-Tory, now Reform UK MP, came up with quite an amusing question about Rachel Reeves' CV, which she's facing accusations that she's embellished it on LinkedIn. And in response, Angela Rayner had a kind of a pre-prepared gag about Lee Anderson's his own CV, i.e. the fact that he's jumped ship from Labour, jumped ship from Tories, and now he's with Reform. So yeah, that was my moment of the week.
And he gets a better job every time he moves.
And that was the punchline, which I missed.
Labour councillor, Tory MP, chief whip of the 5 Reform MPs. My moment of the week was actually also from Deputy Prime Minister's questions, which was Alex Burkhardt. Alex Burkhardt is his name. Many people will respond to that. Alex who? Burkhardt. He is the guy who the Tories put up against Angela Rayner at PMQs. Obviously, when the PM's away, the Deputy PM takes PMQs, and normally the Tories previously would have put up Oliver Dowden. It was the Battle of the Gingers, infamously. But Kemi Badenoch obviously has to put up someone from her top team, and she has chosen Alex Burkhardt, who I think is Shadow Chancellor of Duchy of Lancaster and Northern Ireland. And he's a lawyer, and he has a very loud voice. And what became clear within a few minutes of PMQ starting is that he hadn't tempered the volume of his voice for the fact that there was a microphone right in front of him.
It kept cutting out, didn't it?
Yeah, he didn't need the microphone. Anyone in the country could have sort of comfortably opened a window and heard him loud and clear. He was very, very loud, and as the technicians in the room will know, most microphones, especially in a live situation, have got a limiter on them. So if you shout too loud into the microphone, it drops the volume for a couple of seconds. And that happened about 4 or 5 times during PMQs. So he was sort of grandstanding a little bit and going, shouting over the dispatch box. But every now and again, he'd go, blah, 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 and no one could hear him, and it was hilarious. The other thing I think is worth mentioning on that is whoever decided that the best strategy for beating Angela Rayner, who, as we said before, is rough and ready, but is a savvy operator. Whoever thought it was the best way to beat her at PMQs was with shouting, probably should seek a career somewhere that isn't politics.
I actually thought he was very good. Might be a controversial view, but no, I thought he was very good, and he reminded me of a bit of a young David Cameron when he first became Tory leader in the noughties. Just very, very assured, and he had a bit of that Cameron swashbuckling swagger.
The swagger was there. I think he needs to dial it in. I think you need to sort of scale it back a little bit for that situation, especially because I think where he went wrong is he didn't realise what Angie was doing. He didn't react quickly enough, because what was happening was he was doing quite sort of forceful shouting, leaning into the microphone, all of this, and pointing, and Angela Rayner was just standing up, talking very calmly, very measured, not sounding a lot like Angela Rayner really, but she knew what she was doing. If you got someone shouting at you, you hang back, and it kind of took the oxygen out of it, I thought.
Will he get the gig next time? I think I'd like to see Priti Patel go up against Angela Rayner.
Well, they're saying it's going to be a revolving lineup. Yeah. So yeah, Priti Patel might be fun.
Speaking of Priti Patel, she was at the farmers' demonstration on Tuesday, and she had this incredible kind of Russian-style hat on, fur hat, alongside Victoria Atkins, who was wearing this kind of Union Jack blazer. But yeah, I'd love to see Priti Patel take on Angela Rayner in DPMQs.
Yeah, that would be tremendous fun. We can but hope.
Thank you for listening to the Division Bell. Sadly, I won't be here next week, but my colleague Christian Calgie will be in to take my place.
And I won't be here either. Lizzie is back from next week. And again, you've been listening to the Division Bell. If you want to send us any messages, you can do that on X, Twitter, whatever you call it, at Daily Mirror and at Daily Express.
That's the one.